Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're here on Google Hangouts on Air to talk about closed-loop measurement today. My name is Lindsay Chastain, and I'm the head of Customer Advocacy for LiveRamp. Before joining LiveRamp, I was head of advertising for Sephora, so very excited to talk about this topic today. I'm joined by my friend from LiveRamp. Louis, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. I'm Louis Hellman. I'm product manager for Customer Link, LiveRamp's identity and measurement product. Great.
So we have a lot to cover today. But just a few reminders, if you do have questions during the presentation, please feel free to put those in. There's a Q&A section in the Hangout area, and we'll be answering those at the end during a live Q&A. All right, so let's dive in. Closed loop measurement. So what exactly do we mean when we're saying that? A lot of people refer to it as online to offline or 360 attribution, but really what we mean is the idea of combining your data sources offline and online to get a complete picture of the true ROI of your digital advertising campaigns. Because if you're not measuring where performance happens online and offline, you're really not seeing the full picture at all. So it's easy to think about just measuring digital, right? Because you have all these channels and we know how to do that. And each program has their own way to look at how their channel drives ROI. But if you're looking at your entire marketing budget for your whole brand, you definitely want to be able to understand how your combined efforts are driving incremental sales for the entire enterprise. So the other aspect of this is we know now that consumers are not shopping in a very straight purchase path, right? There's a lot of different touch points that happen, whether you're looking at something on your phone before you go into the store, you're doing some research, you go into the store and then leave and buy online later. It's not linear anymore. So, I mean, just as an example, what's the last thing you bought?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. I'm very excited about this one. This is Reginald, my piñata.
All right. So tell me a little bit about the purchase path and all the different touch points that you went through in order to, acquire Reginald.
Well, so I went online and, I Googled, best piñata and went to a couple of piñata review sites. There's more than you would think to do some research about the various options. And then I noticed after I did that, I started seeing some banner ads on the side of other pages that I was surfing. And, I was out and about and I couldn't wait to order it and wait for a couple of days for it to be shipped. So I said, well, I'm already out running some errands. I noticed that I was stopping by Piñatas Unlimited. It was in the same mall that I was in. So that's where I picked this bad boy up.
All right. I like it.
We'll put them back down there.
And we'll definitely be incorporating the piñata later at the end during the Q&A. But that's a great example of all of the different touch points that happen before you actually end up making that purchase, right? So if I was just a display manager and showing you display ads, if I'm not actually looking at the offline impact, then I might think that my program didn't actually perform. So hugely important that we incorporate all of those aspects. So we know that over 90% of sales, that's total retail sales, are still happening in stores. So if you're not looking at that number, then you're completely missing that entire picture of the ROI you're driving. And then we know that 87% of shoppers are doing research through digital channels. So similar to what you were doing, they're looking for information before they come into your store. So those touch points are all really important in driving that purchase. And then this is the biggest one, and I think probably the most important for everybody listening today. Over 70% of marketing executives would increase their digital spend if they had a better view of the true ROI. So when you think about that, right, that means the digital team could increase their budget if they were able to actually show a larger ROI. So if you're an agency supporting a brand, that means you could have access to an even higher budget too. So this all seems like a no-brainer that we should definitely be doing this, but it's not something that many brands are doing. So why is that? What do you think?
Well, it turns out that until recently, it wasn't really possible to do. And now that we have some new changes in technology with a technology partner as a brand, you are able to, in fact, connect those offline and online data sources.
Got it. So tell me a little bit more about how that works. Like, what is the technology that's making that possible? And how do I take my offline data and actually tie it to an online touch point?
Sure. So as an example, what we can do at LiveRamp with our Customer Link product is take your offline data, which is probably tied to things like names and addresses, email addresses. You've got a lot of data about your consumers as far as the things they like, their purchase history, that kind of thing. Maybe they're part of a frequent shopper program, and you've tracked what they like, what they're interested in. Maybe they've also visited your website, and you have some data about them, traffic on your website, or you've got data about them viewing ads online. So impression data, click data, activity data. You've got data about them searching for products on various search engines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So many different options, right? We're also seeing people moving into things like addressable TV. So I want to see what ads people have seen on their television sets, or perhaps even social, big deal these days. I've been told, what are people looking at on Facebook, on Twitter, et cetera. All of these things, we can take all of these different data sets that are tied to different disparate IDs. So you've got cookies, you've got social IDs, you've got name and address, you've got email address. We can run that through our matching system, and we can assign a single anonymous ID for all of those different data sets. So we go from having a whole series of different IDs that don't really talk to each other. I don't know that this cookie is this person's email address. Yeah. All of a sudden now I can tie them all together to one anonymous ID. It's privacy safe. So that means we can connect online data and offline data that were previously have to be separated by FTC regulations. Now it's all privacy safe. I can combine it all together, and I can have a much more complete and full picture of consumer activity and potential marketing impact.
Makes sense. So a lot of data points there. Is there anything that you can't track?
Sure. Believe it or not, we still can't track everything in the world. You have a little bit of anonymity left. For example, if you're buying something with cash, the old-fashioned way, definitely can't track that, right? Unless you are also enrolled in a shopper program. So I go to the store, I'm paying with cash, but they say, hey, do you have a rewards card? I say, oh, I forgot it at home. They say, no, it's fine, type in your phone number. I type in the phone number at the terminal. They can track what I bought. Now they have my name attached to the fact that I bought this stuff, even with cash. But if it's just something you bought without a credit card, without that rewards program, we definitely can't track cash transactions. We also can't track some online things, particularly if they are privacy sensitive, or perhaps if people are using certain types of browsers that don't allow cookies, or that delete cookies in the session, things like that. Nothing is perfect, but But
you can still get pretty close, I would assume.
You can get very close, yeah. As far as getting close enough to making meaningful statistical analysis, definitely.
Yeah, and optimization decisions. Okay. So if you're an agency working with a brand, then how would that work? Because it's not your data, it's your brand's data, and maybe you have multiple brands that you work with.
Sure. So there's a couple of ways of handling that. One is that you'd have to work with your brand clients to make sure that they're cool with you using the data in this way.
That would be first step.
Right. And are they interested in just seeing insights about their own activity, and using just their data? Maybe they would be interested in sharing that data sort of across the different customers of the agency to get greater insights. Okay, I'm doing consumer packaged goods, but maybe I could find some interesting insights from a media company, for example, right? And maybe we can use those things across. Now, as far as making sure that we keep those things separate, or protect confidentiality as far as contracting agreements and stuff go, we can definitely assign a separate ID per client for you, so that you can't tie those things together without their say-so, or perhaps on the other side, so that they can't share the data behind your back.
Got it. That makes sense. So something that comes up a lot from some of the brands that I've talked to is this concern that they don't have enough data, or maybe it's not organized just right. Is there a perfect amount of data? How do you know when you have enough to work with?
Well, you can never really have too much, right? The more data you have, as far as both volume and variety, you're going to be reducing your variance and your noise, just to throw some stats catchphrases out there. But this is statistics. This is modeling. So statistical principles like sampling apply, right? If you think about how we do, it's election season right now. How do we do these polls? They're really only talking to a few thousand people, and those are pretty good at extrapolating out the feel of the electorate for tens and hundreds of millions of people. Yeah. It turns out that just having a relatively small set of data allows you to draw pretty powerful conclusions. So while we would certainly recommend putting as much as possible into your model, both in terms of sort of amount of data per source or per type, as well as more different types. So not just looking at those online exposures plus, offline transactions, but make sure we get in online transactions, make sure we get in all of the exposures from all of your different media partners are using. Let's bring in that CRM database as far as your call center logs and so forth. The more different types of data you can assemble, the more clear picture you're going to get. And again, reduce that variance, reduce that noise, have more confidence about what you are able to model.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, right? In terms of it's possible now and the technology exists. So we're starting to see more brands move into that area. But it really just depends on what your objective is too, in terms of the amount of data that you need to start with and whether you start with just one channel or if you start with everything. Some of the objectives that we've seen people focus on are things like optimizing media spend across their programs to drive offline sales, or the basic of just understanding what is the offline impact of their digital spend so that they can make better, more efficient media buying decisions, looking at the entire enterprise sales performance. And then at a tactic level, this is where you have someone maybe from a specific channel might look at how can I change my paid search bidding strategy to help drive incremental offline sales? Or maybe for your display campaigns, you want to start incorporating some local content and see if that actually drives better performance. So there's a lot of ways you can look at this, and definitely recommend starting out thinking through, okay, what is my primary objective that I'm trying to achieve? Start small, and then you can continue to scale from there. So one of the brands that has been focused on this in the last few years and doing a lot of innovative stuff in this area is Sephora. And the objective that they were focused on was that basic, just what's the offline influence and are we having an influence at all? So we're spending all this money on digital media campaigns, but is it doing anything for in-stores? So through partnership with LiveRamp and Google, Sephora was able to actually track what the offline influence was, and they did that over a 6-month period just to get a baseline. And then they took those learnings back to their store marketing team. And the historically separated budgets of store marketing and digital marketing, they were able to have this brand new conversation about, hey, maybe we should be looking at this holistically. And the end result was that the budgets were shifted so that the digital team got a 30% increase in their budget. So that's awesome. 30% more money just to do more. So that's one of the biggest learnings that they had, and it's something that I think they're going to keep iterating on. And then the other piece was more channel specific. So like I mentioned, paid search programs, you can adjust bidding strategies. Excuse me while I have a glass. And one of the biggest ones was related to certain keyword terms that previously looked like they weren't performing, right? So it's looking at the online conversion, it was, okay, these terms aren't doing anything for us. But then when they incorporated the offline sales, they were able to see that those terms actually did perform over the longer lifespan of a customer and were helping to increase overall lifetime value. They just might not be driving an immediate e-commerce purchase. So making some adjustments in the bidding strategy was able to give them a 25% increase in their return on ad spend for the paid search program, which is huge because they weren't spending any incremental money to do that. They were just being more efficient. And then the other piece was their display campaigns. So a lot of the display programs were focused more on driving overall Sephora brand sales. And the display team was really looking at performance based on incremental sales that they were able to drive for the website or for the mobile site. When they added in the offline metrics, they were able to see that the lifetime value increase from customers that saw display ads was actually much higher. And then they were able to add incremental funding, that 30% extra that they got. They flipped it into the display program to start doing more nuanced campaigns focused specifically on driving incremental store traffic. So adding things like localized content or any sort of dynamic messaging related to a specific geographic region. And it was amazing to see how much of a difference that actually made, and then changed basically the structure of the display program so that it was focused more on driving total Sephora sales, not just online sales, and then broke down a lot of silos between teams so that the digital team and the store marketing team were able to work more closely together on combined incentives. So that's just one example. And there's a lot more brands that are doing this. And the closed loop measurement is really just step one. So once you get that figured out and start incorporating those learnings into your overall optimization strategies, there's even more that you can do related to activating your data. So we have a lot of customers at LiveRamp that have started to do things like their whole CRM file and optimizing for targeting or cross-channel attribution. So measuring the total impact across all of your channels. So in terms of the data, though, what do you think are sort of the basic things that you should start with, and then how do you scale up from there from a data source aspect?
Sure. So I think there's a couple things to think about. First, it's a garbage in, garbage out kind of setup, right?
Yeah.
So if your data coming in isn't very good, it's not very clean, you've got a lot of errors, a lot of duplications, maybe you don't really have people's names spelled right, or it's not very up to date. There's not so much a technology company partner like LiveRamp or somebody else can really do with that. They can't really help you there. So there are other companies that might be able to help you clean up that data as well. That's a different conversation. Now, another thing is that privacy is very important. There's a lot of regulations in this industry, and I think everybody is pretty conscious of wanting to respect those, and consumers care about their privacy as well. So you have to make sure that you're choosing a partner that understands those privacy regulations and is operating in a privacy safe way. But as far as sort of where do you start and go from there, I think that you're going to want to start with your own data first and foremost, right? Let's get your CRM file in there. Let's get your transaction files in there. Let's get your online campaign data in there. But you can certainly start branching out from there. There's a whole wealth of data out there, a giant ecosystem really now of third-party data, for example, where maybe you want to buy additional data sets from another company that either has data about consumers as far as their characteristics, or maybe somebody else is willing to sell you their transaction history as well, and so forth. Now, of course, the big thing that everybody's really excited about is mobile data. That's where computing is going. It's pretty obvious. I'm not very insightful by saying that. But this is both sort of mobile browser activity, which is not really any different than regular desktop traffic, but also mobile apps. What are people doing in-app? How are we showing them ads there? Is there native content? How are they interacting with brands? And you think about some of these hot new ones like Snapchat, right? You look at what are people watching as far as the stories or as far as that sponsored content? How do we bring that into the picture and use it to really enhance our understanding of what's going on? I also mentioned things like addressable TV. You can really start to get really complicated really fast, but and then go from there and start actually not just looking at, whoa, how did my campaigns do? Or can I attribute this particular type of purchase to this particular type of channel spend, but also take those insights and build whole new models, right? So, maybe you're a female, 25 to 40, likes red shoes, lives on the West Coast. Turns out you're not alone. That there are other people just like that. Now, of course, you're individual, but there are other people that follow those similar characteristics that it turns out maybe were interested in, some sort of other product. They were interested in red earrings as well. We can go from there. Now we can retarget people like that on an aggregate scale. I think that's the important thing to remember here, sort of as far as the anxious consumers out here. We're really looking at this in the aggregate, right? Tens, hundreds of thousands, millions of rows of data, not just about individuals, but about large swaths of individuals. And we really care about how they behave in the aggregate. Let's build a new model based upon that, target them for some new advertising, both online and offline. Yeah.
No, that makes total sense. I think it's really just the basic to understand performance, and then there's so much more you can do with the amount of data that's out there, and the technologies that make it easier to share that data now between companies is just making it open up this whole new playing field. And I feel like you mentioned mobile, that is the connecting device where it's connecting people's digital touch points to their offline experience. And we're seeing some brands that are looking at mobile as their personalization moment in the store. So it's sort of your shopper assistant when you're walking around the store. And previously it was not possible for brands to actually get access to that browsing behavior or app engagement behavior. And now it's becoming more possible so that the store associates can even see some of that live in real time. And it makes it just a more cohesive experience for your customer. And that's the end goal here, right? Is we just want to create a better customer experience. And the more information that we can feed into our models, into our strategies in order to do that, the better it's going to be in the end.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So we have a few questions already here. So just a reminder, if you do have questions, there's a Q&A section in the Hangout app, or you can also post them on the event page, and we're taking those live now. So just to get us started here, we have our first question. If I don't collect POS data tied to PII, which is personally identifiable information, are there any partners I can work with to get that data? That might be more of a question for you.
Sure.
Okay.
The answer is yes. There are definitely partners out there that can help you out. There are partners that can extract that PII or that other identifiable information from transaction history that maybe isn't tied directly to credit cards, or maybe you don't have access to the credit card history, even though they are paying with credit cards. There are companies that can definitely get that information for you.
Got it.
And beyond that, they can actually pull additional data points about those people, bring it along for you. Maybe it's not in your CRM. You didn't know that that person liked red shoes, but somebody else does.
Augmenting your file.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. So kind of back to that question we talked about a little bit earlier, we have a question in here. Would you consider 2,000 unique users a good standard sample size to begin seeing insights?
That's a good question. There's not really a right or wrong answer here. I think 2,000 is definitely large enough for statistical significance.
Yeah.
I think that when you think about marketing as far as retargeting, 2,000 is probably pretty small, right? But I think if you have 2,000 separate unique users or potential customers, and you've got a large set of data points about them from a number of different sources, and you can really go across all 2,000, you can probably get something out of that. I think it would be great if you had another 0 at least.
Of course.
But I would not say that 2,000 is an insignificant amount.
Yeah, you could at least start there. Okay.
Sure.
So do you recommend starting with just one channel when initially getting started with online to offline? So there's an example of measuring search exposure data against transactions. I definitely would recommend this, especially if you're part of a larger organization and there's some significant silos that you have to break down in order to get people bought into the concept of measuring the offline impact. So many companies do start with paid search, and just looking at that exposure data tied to transactions is definitely a good place to start. Display is also another good channel to start with. So it really just goes back to what your true objectives are. Is it to measure the offline influence, or is it to understand how you can drive more incremental offline sales, changing your tactic strategy? Just based on that, then I would say, okay, what's the right channel, and which channel has is set up to actually be agile and nimble enough to take action based on the insights that you get. But then the biggest next step is always to make sure that you are sharing the learnings and insights throughout your organization so that people start to understand that it's possible to look at the offline influence and then expand out from the first channel you started with.
One thing I would want to add to that, though, as well, is while this is definitely a good way to kind of feel it out, start to learn how the process works, how can I unify my data, definitely good to walk before you can run. That said, again, throwing on the stats nerd hat, you don't want to falsely attribute causation when there's just simply a correlation,
true, yeah.
right? So maybe you saw somebody searching for a lot of things, they made a purchase. Well, it probably didn't hurt, right? But that might not be the deciding factor. That might not be the only factor. And that's why, bringing in those sort of a larger wealth of data sources or sort of different types is going to give you additional insight.
Yeah, that's true. Because you're still going to maintain the silos and not be making the most optimal decisions if you're not incorporating all the different channels.
Right. So I think if we said, oh, let's really up our search ad spend after seeing that we saw some correlation here, well, maybe your purchases don't go down, but they don't actually go anywhere. Maybe there was some sort of other factor at play here that wasn't currently accounted for in the model.
Yeah, that's really true. I think paying attention to incremental revenue is really important, and making sure that whatever investment changes you make are driving a true incremental lift, and testing to see if you really had to do that or not. And again, just making sure that you start with one, but then add others quickly afterwards.
Yeah, and that's where test and control type stuff comes into play. Just because you see something, don't jump in feet first. Or perhaps as a cannonball, even worse. And really, we saw search is doing great. Let's up it by 10x. Well, maybe we should test our assumptions first.
Test and learn. I really think this concept of marketers becoming data scientists, it's have a hypothesis, test into it, see how the outcomes are, and just keep going. So we have another one. Which types of technology partners do you recommend working with for this? Well, we're a little biased there, but definitely Google and LiveRamp have an awesome partnership in this area. Who else do you want to throw into that mix in terms of what partners would be the right ones to start looking at?
Sure. So I think some of this is going to depend upon your level of sort of comfort and sophistication as far as data science goes and statistics, along with the type of data you have access to, along with your budget, right? Let's not forget that. This is an important part of the equation, but you certainly are going to need a partner at the very least, along with all of your online platforms that you do spending with, to provide you that data back. You're going to need a partner that can do some sort of data onboarding or measurement and matching services where they can take the different online and offline IDs and unify those together. That's crucial for this entire proposition. Now, the next step beyond that is, do you feel comfortable taking that data and working with it on your own? Are you cool with building an environment that meets privacy standards, that has enough sophistication, speed, and flexibility to do the type of research you want? Do you have people on staff who can ask the right questions, right? I think in a lot of ways that can be the hardest part. It's not just, oh, great, I have this data, what can I do with it? But really it's, oh, I want to know if X influences Y, and therefore I should do A, B, and C, to just use random letters for no reason. That is really important, right? That's actually the harder part, is thinking critically about the data I have, what can I do with it? And that's where it might be helpful to bring in another party, somebody who is really good at doing this measurement stuff. This is what they do. They have people on staff who are good at building models. They can produce nice, pretty charts and graphs for all of you executives out there. And they're the ones who can ask those questions for you. They can put things together. And they can then also potentially provide you recommendations about what to do next. Or maybe that's yet another party doing consulting services. Sometimes different companies do all of these things. You can engage them on different levels. So again, just to restate, it really goes back to how comfortable you feel. You're going to need your media partners. You're going to need an onboarding partner to do the matching and identification. Beyond that, it's a little bit up to you and how good you feel about your own abilities.
Yeah, makes sense. I think that's something that a lot of brands struggle with, is figuring out, can we do this in-house? Do we need a measurement partner? Do we need to hire a data science team? There's really no one right way to do it. But like you said, just figure out what your capabilities are and where you need to invest in partners to help you scale. All right, so any tips for overcoming organizational challenges that exist when getting started with online to offline measurement? That's a great question. It's certainly not easy to start breaking down some of the silos between teams, especially when different teams have a different incentive structure and their focus is on driving a particular metric, and maybe it's just driving offline sales versus driving online sales, or maybe it's driving category sales versus just mobile app sales. So it's always good to put on the hat of your customer and be very customer centric in how you go about thinking about your strategy and positioning things to your executive team. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the customer experience, right? And no matter what KPIs and metrics are in between, the primary thing you're trying to do is to make your customer have a better experience so that they take whatever action you want them to take. And starting small is a good, and testing and getting some initial learnings is a great way to start sort of road showing throughout your organization. But again, making sure you have the right partners who can help you along the journey, especially if it's a new journey for your company. I think that's really key. And there's a lot of people out there doing this, so talk to your peers, and it's great to get learnings from other brands and understand how they're doing things, and use those to help tell your story internally. But there is no magic bullet for sure. Anything you'd add there?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. Yeah.
All right, then is LiveRamp integrated with Attribution 360?
That one I'm not 100% familiar with.
Google
the new name
analytics product for odometry, and yes, I believe we are.
It's definitely something we have early conversations about.
Yep. And that's really how we have been able to help some companies like Sephora get some initial learnings on the online to offline piece. All right, and then after I start with online to offline measurement, what would you recommend as the next step in measurement? Probably the 360 attribution concept, where you've incorporated your offline metrics with your online metrics. Then it's really about figuring out which touch points are driving incremental activity. Anything you want to add there in terms of next measurement thing that you see brands doing?
Sure. I think it's a little bit what we talked about earlier, right? So measurement is more of a, look at that. That's interesting, right? And then, sort of the next step of cross-channel attribution, which is, not only are we seeing that people of a certain characteristic are seeing ads in this channel, or they're sort of responding to my marketing this way, but rather, it turns out that if I show this creative content, and this creative content, and this creative content across these different channels, and this order to this type of person, it tends to drive, a boost in sales by 0.1% or something. That'd be huge, right? So, that's sort of the next level of attribution beyond measurement. And then beyond that is the modeling, audience building, and retargeting, right? Really taking those lessons to home and thinking about, okay, we saw where our ad spend made the most sense. We see where we're kind of wasting money over here, trying to target this sort of segment of the population. Let's actually go out and intelligently use our money next time. Let's make more creative around this theme. People aren't really responding to this version of our campaign. Let's use these insights and actually go out there and retarget appropriately.
Yeah, makes sense. I think it's really interesting with the creative piece of it, and I'm seeing some brands do some really, really cool stuff where they figured out like this is definitely not the right creative for this audience, and then they make one slight change and it has such a huge impact. So absolutely. Totally agree. All right. Do you really need a partner, or can this data be extracted manually and the information be viewed or researched manually? So I think this goes back to like what you were saying about the privacy safe environment and, making it possible to connect across multiple partners. You really do need a technology partner to do that, right?
You do. You're not going to be able to tie, for example, double-click cookies through Google to your own offline CRM. It's just not going to happen. Google encrypts those cookies for privacy reasons as well, and you're much less, to try and tie those to somebody's mobile device ID. There's no way that you have sort of on your own of doing that. That's something that requires building very large match partner networks, exchanging these bits of data around the web, and even then, even the best companies out there are only going to be seeing a match rate of 20%, 40%, 60% when things are really going well. So trying to do that on your own manually would involve spending a lot more money, probably, and quite honestly, at this point, you'd just be building a competitor to one of the existing brands out there. So if that's something you're interested in, have fun. But we would say that it's much more cost efficient to engage with somebody who has this expertise, who already has the processes and the structure in place.
Makes sense. And there are definitely options if you are only interested in doing, activating data in one particular channel. Then yes, you can upload your file to that one partner, but then you're really limiting yourself to just that partner's network. And that's not really where you're set up for scale in terms of measurement. So definitely recommend finding a technology partner that's going to make it possible for you to start small, but then scale quickly. All right. And then next question here has disappeared. All right.
That's all we got.
I think that might be all we have. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope this was informative. And if you do have additional questions, definitely invite you to email info@liveramp.com. And then you can also view this presentation again in the Google Hangouts app. And thank you very much.